Main Bay of Elodium Morris Pradium, Ante, Colorado. The acronym is AMPAC. I'm the Chief Judge of Consular Court. Today is Class 55. Class 55. What did we learn in Class 54? Well, we're talking about what's called political status. More should start understanding that we have to change our vernacular. We have to understand what political status is all about. We've all been taught about status. Status. But we need to add a word to that. It's called political status. What does political mean? According to Black's Law Dictionary, under the word juror, it means state. So political status, what is your state status? What is the facts about your state? What is your state of facts? So when more start to get into what's called Moorish national status, your status is a Moorish national of a Moorish state. So your political status is what? You're a Moorish national of your Moorish state government, right? So what we're learning now is about political status. Not just status as a standalone word, but political status. That's the name of the game of planet Earth. There's 54 states in Africa. That's their political status, is their state. There's 50 states in Europe. That's their political status in their nationals. There's 35 recognized states in the continent of Mexico. Soon to be 36, because AMPAC is working on that, getting our registration number from the UN. Will be 36 recognized states, right? Whether AMPAC's a non-member state or not, right? So therefore, all the states have what you call political status. So Moors have to start understanding that we need to change our vernacular. What else do we need to change? We have to stop referring to things just simply being a strong man. That's what you call connotative linguistics. According to your treaties, it's called what? Moroccan subject. We have to start underscoring what is a Moroccan subject. And what is a Moroccan subject? It is a Moor that's been naturalized in a foreign country. What's the foreign country? Per this example, the United States of America, along with their United States International Organization, which is their corporation. So the vast majority of Moors, 99% of Moors, and when I say Moors, what do I mean? The word Moor is a generic word. The word Moor symbolizes who? It's about your political status. So therefore, you fall into a political status, a category, a caste system. But you can cast yourself into your own system. And what system is that? The system of what's called an organized dual society. Because you, and only you, have the obligation as a Moor to return to Morocco and consent to a Moorish state government. It's called your self-determination, right? It is your human right to choose. And if you don't choose to return to Morocco, that makes you what? As a Moor, it makes you a Moroccan subject. And if you work for the United States government, it makes you what? A protege. But you're still a Moroccan subject nonetheless, right? So that's what we're learning from Class 54. What else do we learn from Class 54? We started now getting to what's called the Act Algeciras 1906, Chapter 1, right? Articles 1 through 12, and keeping in mind that the Act Algeciras of 1906 is a contract, and the parties must be known in any contract, right? So we started learning immediately in Chapter 1 that the parties is set up where it's the Sultan and the Moors controlling the Empire of Morocco. And who are the other parties? Who's on the other side of the contract? Who's on the other side of the table? Well, foreign citizens, for example, of the United States of America, right? Because the United States of America is what you call the contracting state according to the treaty. The United States of America in 1871 created a municipal corporation known as the United States. And the United States is known as what in international law? It's known as an international organization. And that international organization set up 50 subsidiaries, i.e. organs, known as their 50 union states. But don't get fooled by the word state. When the United States uses the word state, lowercase s, they recognize, even though they're using the word state, they are not an organic state. They're a corporation, they're a subsidiary of the international organization known as the United States. States. The United States is not an organic state. It's a municipal corporation, all right? That must be understood. So as we're learning in chapter 1, we're learning about the parties and who has the authority according to the contract. Moorish governments. But you can't have a Moorish government unless you have a Moorish state. And you can't have a Moorish state unless you have a Moorish constitution. And you can't have a Moorish constitution until you set up your 3 branches of government, establish the constitution, and then ratify, deposit, and promulgate according to your treaty. The Act Algeciras, 1906, right? Chapter 7, Articles 120 to 123 talked about legislation, constitution, ratification, depository, and promulgation. Then after that, you do what? You promulgate with who? United Nations, right? Charter, Article 102, with the Secretariat, i.e. their Secretary General, right? That's called promulgation. They turn into a publication that now gives everybody notice that the new Moorish state, the modern organic state, is now on the record. What are they doing? What is the United Nations Charter doing according to the Secretariat? Following the instructions of international law. But what specifically in international law is the United Nations Charter members, their organs following? They're following the instructions of Moorish treaties, right? They're following what you call as Chapter 7, right? Your miscellaneous provisions, right? All your provisions of Articles 120 to 123. So the charter members are following the instruction of Moorish native law. And in the Act of Algeciras, they refer to as what? Moorish Mohammedan law, right? We looked up Mohammedan, that means what? The native law. That's the positive law. And that's what all Moors have to follow. So at the end of the day, as we're reading chapter 1 and now getting ready to go into chapter 2 here very soon, we must understand, in the contract, known as the Act Algeciras of 1906, the Moors are responsible for enforcing the treaties. But guess what, Moors? You can't enforce a treaty unless you have a constitution. So if you don't have a constitution, you can't enforce the treaties because the constitution sets up your 3 branches of government. And in your 3 branches of government sets up the officers of that state. And the officers of that state take their oath and allegiance in their offices of that state. Now they become what's called the competent authority of the state in order to negotiate any treaty disputes. That must be understood. All right? So let's go ahead and move into the class. Today is class 55. Obviously, we always open up about our Constitution. This is AMPAC's Constitution as an example. All the Moors would need to have their own independent state constitutions. Why do I say that? Because your treaty said that you need a constitution for each territory. Act Algeciras, 1906, right? Articles 120 to 123 sets forth the obligations of Moors and the obligations of the other parties of the contract. Now do you see why the United States refers to its 50 territories as states? Why do they do that? They're following instructions. Yes, they add the word state. For example, the state of Colorado, right? They say the state of Colorado, but they use the word state. They're only using it as a placeholder. They know that they're not an organic state. They know that they're not an organic state because they all pledge their allegiance to who? The United States. I've showed you videos of the presidents taking their oath to the United States, so therefore all their subsidiaries take their oath also to the United States corporation, right? So therefore, why is the United States using the word state? Because they know that they cannot hold on to any territory unless they're using the word state, because the word state sets up the obligations to be able to control a particular territory. All right? So that's what Moors have to understand. When we use the word state, capital S, lowercase t-a-t-e, capital S, lowercase t-a-t-e, that's the organic state. All right? Okay. So let's go ahead and get into the class. In class 54, we were reading over Articles 1 through 12, right? And one of the most important articles in chapter 1 was Article 8. Remember I told you, Moors, in this contract, it sets up the parties who has authority in this contract. Who gets to tell who what to do, right? But it also lets you know who has the authority over who, right? So when we're starting to read the Act of Algeciras of 1906 as it relates to chapter 1, Article 8 really starts to identify who the parties are, okay? So, Mother, as a refresher, as an overlap, can you please go ahead and read Article 8?
Article 8, a copy of the reports and communications made to the Magazine by the Inspector General with reference to his mission shall at the same time be transmitted to the Dean of the diplomatic body at Tangier, in order that the diplomatic body be enabled to satisfy itself that the Sharifian police acts in conformity to the decisions taken by the conference, and to see whether it guarantees effectively and in conformity with the treaties the security of person and property of foreign citizens, subjects, and proteges, as well as that of commercial transactions.
All right, thank you. So Article 8 starts to identify the parties and who has authority over who, right? So as you read Article 8, as a refresher, a copy of the reports and communications made to the Magazine by the Inspector General with reference to his mission shall at the same time be transmitted to the Dean of Diplomatic Body at Tangier, in order that the diplomatic body being able to satisfy itself that the Sharifian police acts in conformity. So who's the Sharifian police? The Moors. So the Moors have to act in conformity to the decisions taken by the conference. What's the conference? The Act of Algeciras is the conference. It is the convention. It is the treaties. So the Moors had an obligation to what? Act in conformity to the instructions of this treaty. Continuing. So the Moors had to see whether it guarantees effectively and in conformity with the treaty. So the Moors had to be in conformity with the treaties. That was our obligations. Continuing. To the security of persons and property of foreign citizens, subjects, and proteges, as well as that of commercial transactions. So, as we talked about in Class 54, Moors have to start changing their vernacular. Moors have to start understanding who are the subjects and who are the proteges. 99% of Moors, whether they're conscious Moors or unconscious Moors, are subjects and proteges of the United States. Why? Because they failed to return to Morocco and consented to a Moroccan state government. That's easy, right? That's the Treaty of Madrid, 1880, Article 15. We know this, paragraph 1. But one of the things that we have to point out as Moors is that the answers to the test have always been in front of us, right? Always been in front of us. So one of the things I want to point out to the Moors is this. Because I recognize as Moors send correspondence, I recognize what Moors have been studying for decades. There's been some misunderstanding, some misinterpretation, right? Misconcepts based upon what we've been reading, right, over the decades. So as a reference point, let's take a look at something. The Moors will tell you in a minute, the United States don't have jurisdiction over them. Isn't that what they say all the time? Every Moor will tell you, the United States don't have jurisdiction over them. And guess what? That's not an accurate statement. The United States has absolute legal and lawful jurisdiction over who? Moroccan subjects. The United States and the United States of America has legal and lawful jurisdiction over who? Moroccan proteges. But the United States, and the United States of America, does not have jurisdiction over who? Moor state governments or the empire. So the International Court of Justice, in the case concerning France versus the United States of America, 1952, gave the United States a limited jurisdiction over who? Moroccan subjects. And who are the Moroccan subjects listed as today? Citizens of the United States. So let's talk about this quite quickly. As Moors know, Here's the Constitution of the United States of America. Well, at least it says that on the cover page, right? So once you open up the Constitution, you start reading it, you quickly realize that they're making their oath to who? The United States international organization. If you go back and watch any of the presidents since 1871, they all pledged their oath to the United States, right? So don't get fooled by the cover page. But let's talk about their Constitution. We have to do this, right? Why are we doing this? Because we're talking about the Act of Algeciras of 1906. We have to point out the mistakes that the Moors have made, the misconcepts. Why do we have to point it out? Because if we don't point out what we've done wrong, then we're doomed to repeat it again, right? So let's underscore it and let's fix it, okay? All right, so what I have up here is an example of Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1 of the United States of America, which is the contracting state. So the United States of America is the contracting state according to your treaty, right? We learned that in the Vienna Convention of 1969, where it talks about contracting state. So United States of America as a name, in name only, is a contracting state, okay? So according to their Constitution of the United States of America and the United States, which is an international organization, that Constitution, talking about two separate constitutions, no matter which one you pick, look at Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1. Let's read it. Okay, Mother.
Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution and laws of the United States and treaties made of which shall be made. Under their authority to all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls, to all cases of admiralty, and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies to which the United States shall be a party, to controversies between two or more states, between a state and citizens of another state, between citizens of different states, between citizens of the same state claiming land under grants of different states, and between a state. Are the citizens thereof in foreign states citizens or subjects?
All right. So that's the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the United States. Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1. What's happening here? Moors will tell you that the United States don't have jurisdiction over Moors. But see, Moors don't understand right here in their Constitution, it refers to subjects. So let's read it. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, comma. You see that? Mm-hmm. So what are they telling you immediately? That you're really talking about the United States Constitution, not the United States of America. They tell you in this article that it's the Constitution of the United States. Let's continue. So the Constitution of the United States, keep in mind, the United States ratified, right, and promulgated the treaties. The United States is an international organization, ratifies, deposits, and promulgates treaties. They do it domestically. And then the United States of America on the international level deposited with who? The Secretary of the United Nations, Article 102. So they act as a dualist, have a dualist society where the United States is ratifying treaties and the United States of America is signing treaties. So the United States of America signs the treaties and then the United States ratifies the treaties. Okay? Two separate entities. But listen. So under the authority of what? Under the authority of what? Of the United States. The United States is ratifying treaties. I'm pointing this out for a reason. We're talking treaty right now. I'm going to prove something to the Moors. So the judicial power should extend to all cases referring to treaties that the United States have ratified. So since the United States has ratified the treaties, and in the Constitution, Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1, it gave the United States judicial power over who? Their citizens and subjects. It's in the Constitution. Listen to me, Moors. Moors are saying, enforce the Constitution. Enforce the Constitution. Isn't that what they say? And guess what the United States is doing? Enforcing the Constitution. But Moors don't understand that they are subjects according to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the United States of America. Well, how did you end up being subjects? Well, we learned about that in the Treaty of Madrid, 1880, right? The treaty said you were a subject. Their Constitution says you're a subject. And guess what else says you're a subject? Go to your treaty. These are Moorish treaties. Act Algeciras, 1906, Chapter 1, Article 8, refers to you, Moors, those Moors that have not returned to Morocco, to pledge their consent to a Moorish state government are what? Subjects. It's right there in your treaty. So the United States of America and the United States has legal judicial authority over Moroccan subjects and who else? Moroccan proteges. It's right there in your face. The Moors will tell you, the United States of America don't have jurisdiction over me. That's not true. That's not an accurate statement. We have been misinterpreting this Constitution. But here's the worst part. Okay, listen. Constitution of AMPAC. This is just an example, right, for study purposes. Constitution of AMPAC, year 2021. The Moors never had a constitution. So we've been trying to enforce the Constitution of the United States of America, not understanding that we were Moroccan subjects. But you can't enforce a constitution unless you have what? Something in like manner. These two have to now do what? Cancel each other out. Once you talk constitution, both sides, you recognize both sides have constitution. What do you do next to solve a problem? Then you go directly to the treaties. Act Algeciras, 1906. So the United States is telling Moors without telling Moors, because they don't respond to Moors, because Moors don't have judicial standi, because they're still subjects, according to your Moorish treaty. Wait a minute. We're still talking about the Act Algeciras, 1906. This is Chapter 1, Article 8. We got to take our time on this, Moors, because Moors swear up and down the United States don't have jurisdiction over them. Now, I've already shown you the Constitution of the United States of America. Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1. We got to talk about this, Moors. Because once I point this out to you, you have to stop talking about enforcing this, because guess what they're doing? They are enforcing it. Because what? You acquiesced. How did you acquiesce? Because you did not establish your own constitution. To take yourself out of what? You had to take yourself out of what status? Subject status. You had to take yourself out of what? The protege status. And what status, once you have a constitution, what status do you end up with? Okay, now you go up top. You become the Sharifian police, i.e. the Moorish police. What are you policing? Your constitution and the treaties. So you have to do what? Choose between being a subject and a protege versus returning to Morocco to be a Sharifian police to police the policies, procedures of your own treaties. That way you can maintain what? What are you maintaining? conformity with the treaties through your Constitution. So your Constitution enforces the treaties. Without this, there is no this. Without this, this is how you now ratify your treaties. They become one. Without it, you've done what? You've acquiesced. Listen, we're going to stay here for just a minute. When we start talking about the Moroccan Empire, right? The United States of America knows perfectly well that you're standing in the Moorish Empire. Now, your treaty will refer to as what? Listen. Your treaty refers to as what? Sharifian police, right? Sharifian Empire, right? The Sharifian authority, correct? According to the treaty. But keep in mind, this was written in 1906, right? 1906. Look what the United States says in the same year. August 3rd, 1906. Now keep in mind, the Act of Algeciras was initially signed by the United States of America. Where? At what date? April 1906 is when the United States of America signed it. So the United States comes back and has a conversation August 3rd, 1906. We've gone over this, right? So in the same year, listen to what the United States refers to as the Sharifian Empire. You go down now, page 459, 460, right? You go down to section 2 and 3, right? They talk about more subjects. More subjects lost their nationality. What does that mean when you lost your nationality? You lost your nation. So if you lost your nation, that means you lost your state. You immediately became stateless. And since you became stateless, listen, more subjects lost their nationality, lost their nation, lost their state, only by becoming naturalized in or protected by the United States of America, having treaty relations with the Moorish Empire. So the United States of America don't call it the Sharifian Empire. They call it the Moorish Empire because they know that Sharifian Empire or Mohammedan Empire, these are just overlays. These are dynasties, but they know it's the Moorish Empire. And they go right into the answers to the test, right? This is being redundant. Redundancy is good. They go right into the Treaty of Madrid. They point out the solution to you about subjects. Why are we talking about this? We're talking about the Act of Algeciras, 1906, Chapter 1, Article 8, talks about who? Subjects. Moors keep referring to it as straw man. It's not a straw man. It's a Moroccan subject. And as soon as Moors understand and change their vernacular to Moroccan subjects, which is treaty language. Moroccan subject is treaty language. And treaty is supreme law of the land. So you need to speak the supreme law of the land verbiage. Change your vernacular, Moors, and you will change your status immediately because now you're enforcing treaty language. Okay. So Article 15 of the Treaty of Madrid, they go right into the first words, any subject of Morocco. Keeping in mind, the United States already wrote Moorish Empire. So who are the Moroccans then? Who? Subjects of Morocco. Who are the subjects of Morocco? Moors. Moors are Moroccans. Let's go back to your treaty. Act of Algeciras, 1906. So the Sharifian police, which is the Moorish government, state government, has to act in conformity to decisions taken by the conference. What's the conference? The Act of Algeciras, 1906. And to see whether it guarantees effectively and in conformity with the treaties the security of person and property of the foreign citizens, the subjects and proteges, as well as that of commercial transactions. Why? Because Moors oversee commerce. We'll learn more about that, all right? Let's go back to the Constitution of the United States of America. I have to underscore this. This is why I keep trying to tell the Moors to put this down and pick up your treaties and your own constitution. Why are you trying to enforce this? Because you don't have your own. It's the only reason why. Put it down. Why? Because you're telling them to enforce it on you as a Moroccan subject. So let's talk about this. What's happening? This is the Act of Algeciras, 1906. We'll be talking about Chapter 1, Articles 1 through 12, and Chapter 2, Articles 13 through 30. Who are the parties in the contract? There's two sides to the contract. Every contract has two signatories. So you got the signatory powers over here. You got the Moroccan government signing on this side, okay? It's two parties. Who are the parties? The de jure party is the empire itself. Then you got the Sultan at the time, who was what? The administrator over the empire. Then you got the Moorish government, Moorish state government, more specifically. Then you got Moorish nationals of the Moorish state. And Kendrick Bey is now what? A Moorish national. Keep in mind, Moors. Kendrick Bey was never a Moroccan subject. Why? Because Kendrick Bey was never on the registrar or registration of the United States. However, you got Moors out there that did put their Bey on the record. Guess what they did? They made Kendrick Bey a Moroccan subject all over again in that name. Can they correct the record? Yeah, when they pledged their allegiance to a Moorish state, now you can remove Kendrick Bey from the registrar of the United States. All right? Listen. So Kendrick Bey now returned to Morocco and denounced and renounced any alleged allegiance as a naturalized person of a foreign country, right? Kendrick Bey did that because he said, look, if y'all trying to say I was on the record, I'm not. Kendrick Bey was never on the record of the United States. Never. Okay? Unless you did that on your own. But most Moors will tell you they never went down to some Secretary of State or sat in front of some United States judge to put their Bey on the record. Most Moors haven't done that. All right? So we're talking right now as an example of Moors who did not put their Bey on the registrar of the United States. So let's keep it simple. So Kendrick Bey is now a Moorish national of his Moorish government, state government. And now the former Moroccan subjects known as Kendrick Johnsons of the world. All of your Johnsons, right? Which is the corporate name, all caps, right? This is an example. Kendrick Johnson now, who used to be on this side, is a Moroccan subject, right? So Kendrick Johnson used to be a subject, right? So let's go back up to the treaty. Well, matter of fact, let's start here. Kendrick Johnson used to be a subject. Now Kendrick Johnson says, I don't want to be a subject no more. I'm going to consent my allegiance. I'm going to denounce and renounce any naturalized status with the United States of America or the United States International Organization. So Kendrick Johnson now comes on this side of the party, okay? How does he do that? Through an application, okay? What's the application? What is that? You have to pledge an oath. It's allegiance. It's affirmation on the record with the Moorish state, okay? So now, Kendrick Bey is a Moorish national, and Kendrick Johnson is a former Moroccan subject. Former Moroccan subject. Former Moroccan subject that no longer now is a subject of the United States, so therefore the United States no longer has what? Judicial power. Moors been saying enforce the Constitution, and that's exactly what the United States has been doing to who? Kendrick Johnson. Who was Kendrick Johnson? Who was Kendrick Johnson? He was what? Subject. Moors just have to take the time to read. Moors have to get out of fellowship and get into scholarship. The answers to the test have been in front of our faces the whole time. Let's read this again. This is important to understand because I got to get Moors to start seeing this for what it is. Moors love to talk about the Constitution of the United States of America, or they say for the United States of America. It doesn't matter. This isn't your Constitution, so don't worry about what the name is. Tell me the name of your state provincial government. What's the name of your Moor state? Tell me the name of your Constitution. Can we do that, Moors? This is AMPAC study session. We're studying. What are we doing? We're examining what we've done wrong. We're examining misconceptions, because if we don't do that, we're doomed to repeat it again. Let's study. This is Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution of the United States of America. I'm going to stay here for a second, because this is a pain point for a lot of Moors. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made which shall be made under their authority to all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies to which the United States shall be a party, to controversies between two or more states, between a state and citizens of another state, between citizens of a different state, between citizens of the same state claiming lands under grants of different states, and between a state or the citizens thereof and foreign states, citizens or subjects. But you know, Moors don't identify with this word right here. Moors don't say, well, I'm not a subject. Who's not a subject? Is the question. I'm going to say it again. Who's not a subject? You know who wasn't a subject? Kendrick Bay. But Kendrick Bay, if he didn't pledge his allegiance to a Moor state, then Kendrick Bay is an alien, because Kendrick Bay don't exist nowhere. That's what makes you stateless. We've gone over this before. So who is the subject then? Who is the subject that they have judicial power over? Kendrick Johnson, if Kendrick Johnson is still over here as a party. Okay, now let's go to your treaty of 1906. Got to make sense of this, man. So in your treaty, 1906, chapter 1, article 8, right? Scrolling back down, Moorish government, the de jure Moorish state government has jurisdiction over who? Because of the treaties, the security of persons and property. So Moorish state governments have authority and jurisdiction over any persons and property of who? Foreign citizens, subjects, and proteges. Foreign citizens, subjects, and proteges. Keeping in mind, proteges are no different than the subjects. They're just all Moroccan subjects. And therefore, the United States has jurisdiction over who? Citizens and subjects. Your treaty says what? It talks about who? Citizens and subjects. Moors have to understand you've been branded as subject. What type of subject? Well, you have to understand before the Moors were usurped, before there was a regime of capitulations, all the Moors were considered subjects of who? The Sultan. Just like the United States calls their citizens, they call them citizens. but Moors were considered subjects under their sultan. That's a positive thing. Because in Great Britain considers all its people who? Subjects. In Great Britain, everybody's subject to who? The crown. In a positive way. However, when Moors got usurped, now we became subjects of the United States. What does that mean? We became prisoners of war. We're still prisoners of war to this very day under a regime of capitulations. What does capitulation mean? Keep that in mind. What does capitulation mean? Capitulation means in military law. So their military usurped us under what? Use of force, coercion, right? Fraud, breach of treaties. But the worst part was what? It was COINTELPRO conversal Moors who helped to overthrow Moroccan Moors. The Moors of Morocco got usurped by Moors from Great Britain. The Moors of Morocco got usurped by the Moors of Scotland. The Moors of Morocco got usurped by who? The Moors of Wales, and the German Moors, and the Portuguese Moors, and the Spaniard Moors, and the Scandinavian Moors, and the French Moors, German Moors, etc., etc., etc. We got usurped, and we became subjects. We became subjects of the United States of America. Why are we spending so much time on this? Moors have to understand, your treaty is the supreme law of the land. And in this contract, it's automatically setting up to let you know who are the parties. Moors cannot enforce the Act Algeciras of 1906 if you're not on this side of the equation. If you're still over here, the United States still has judicial power over you. How do we know that? Because the ICJ confirmed it in 1952. How else do we know it? Because your treaty says you're a subject. Your treaty says you're a subject. How else do we know it? The Constitution of the United States of America referred to you as a subject. This word subject has what you call legal ramifications. Because you don't know what your political status is. Moors have to change their vernacular. It's not a straw man. Kendrick Johnson is not a straw. Kendrick Johnson's Moroccan subject. And according to 99% of the Moors, whether they're conscious or unconscious, conscious or conscious, hold on, let me say it again. Conscious or unconscious as it relates to your treaty rights. Most Moors on this side of the equation. They're fighting to get over here. But what mistake are we making? We're not enforcing the triple principle. We've been writing writs and affidavits. The entire time we were supposed to do what? Establish constitutions that sets forth the latitude, longitude of your state. After that, you were supposed to do what? Enact legislation and start to accede to the treaties. And once you acceded to the treaties and you ratified, deposited, and promulgated your law, after that you went right into consular court to submit your what? Orders, judgments, and opinions according to the International Court of Justice, case concerning France versus United States of America, 1952, page 202, tells you the truth. And it tells you what? In order to enforce Moroccan law, you have to enforce it through consular court against the United States. And by that way, and that way only. Did it say write writs and affidavits? No. Did it say send the United States of America notices that you're now Kendrick Bay? No. Okay. We have to underscore that. The United States of America is enforcing the treaties on Moors. Let's continue. Article 6, Constitution of the United States of America, and the Constitution of the United States. What does Article 6, Clause 2 say? Matter of fact, Clause 2 and Clause 3. Let's read it. Okay, so we got Article 6, the Constitution of the United States of America and the United States. We're going to Clause 2 and Clause 3. Okay? Mother, can you start right here? Clause 2.
This Constitution and the laws of the United States, what shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, are what shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding.
Thank you. If you simply just read it, now that you're aware of what the Act of Algeciras talks about as it relates to parties, this is why I talk about parties all the time. Listen more. The United States of America is enforcing Article 6, Clause 2, which they call the Supremacy Clause, on who? Moroccan subjects. Who's the Moroccan subject? Kendrick Johnson. Listen. Article 6, Clause 2 of the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the United States. This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made. So they're enforcing treaties in this clause, right? Or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. And the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary, notwithstanding. What's happening? The United States of America is enforcing what? Treaties. The United States of America is enforcing treaties, and they're enforcing what? For the judges to enforce the treaty language. And in your treaty, you are what? A subject. But the Moors refer to a straw man. Tell me where it says in any treaty it says the word straw man. It don't exist. But I can tell you in a treaty what does exist. The word what? Subject. So all this time the Moors have been trying to do what? Yeah, man, you got to get away from that straw man. Ain't no such thing as a straw man to come to the supreme law of the land. And what's the supreme law of the land? What did the United States say the supreme law of the land was? The treaty. They said the treaties which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. And the judges in every state shall be bound to the treaties. And the treaty said that you're what? A subject. And since you are a subject, you go back to Article 3. And since you're a subject, that means they have judicial power over the subject. But Moors will tell you in a minute, United States of America don't have jurisdiction over me. Who's the me? Who is me? Let's define it. Who is me? Well, they'll say, well, I'm Kendrick Bay. United States of America ain't claiming they have jurisdiction over Kendrick Bay because they don't know who the heck Kendrick Bay is. Because Kendrick Bay don't exist on no more state registrar. Has never pledged his allegiance to a Moorish state in front of a Moorish judge standing there with his hand up as Kendrick Bay pledging his allegiance to a Moorish state government. And that judge now as a witness now puts his name, his appellation on the record of the Moorish state. Until then, Kendrick Bay don't exist. So who are they trying to prosecute? Kendrick Johnson, because Kendrick Johnson is still over here as a subject. This is why language matters more. This is why I keep trying to tell you it's about your political status. What does political mean? State. What is your state of facts? And what is the fact about your state? And if you can't tell them about your state of facts, which is the fact of your state, then guess what? You immediately come under the judicial power of the United States because they're enforcing treaties on who? Subjects. Moore's got to understand this. So every time we say, enforce the Constitution, what are we telling them? To do their job. Because Moors have acquiesced to continue to be subjects. Because we don't study our own treaties. We're too busy studying what? The statutes of the corporate states. We're too busy studying this and their statutes. And the whole time, what is the supreme law of the land? Treaties. Treaties. Act Algeciras, 1906. Treaty of Madrid, 1880. Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1836. Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1787. Right? But most importantly, Act Algeciras, 1906, Article 123 says what? This treaty prevails over all other treaties. It prevails. But guess what? They all mean nothing if you didn't ratify them, accede to them through your Moorish state. Without this, this don't exist. Which means this don't exist. Because if this existed, you'd already know to ratify this to make it one. That's the power of the pen. That's the power of the matriarchal council. That's the power and understanding why the women have to use their intellect, to use your penmanship, your intellect, your wisdom, to help all the Moors get back into proper political status. And political means what? State. You got to get back in proper political state status. It's all about status. So let's do a quick example, a quick test, okay, shall we? Kendrick Bay has a nationality card, not state ID. So it's a little test. If he has a nationality card, by default, Kendrick Bay is saying, what side of the contract is he? He's on this side of the contract as a subject, which means the United States judicial court has authority over him. But Kendrick Bay will swear up and down, no. The United States of America don't have jurisdiction over me. Yes, they do. It's in their constitution that you told them to enforce. All because you haven't returned to Morocco. You have not returned to the empire. To become what? A Moorish national. To be Kendrick Bay on this side of the contract. So the United States of America is enforcing what? Contract. It's contract law, Moors. Under what's called strict liability. It's a tort. So Moors right now are negligent. Gross negligence. I'll say it again. Moors in a status what you call gross negligence because you have failed to go from being a subject to returning to Morocco to become a Moorish national. Keeping in mind, Kendrick Bay was never a Moroccan subject because Kendrick Bay don't exist. This was Kendrick Bay right here. Here's Kendrick Bay right here. If he hasn't pledged allegiance, that's what Kendrick Bay is. Nothing but a blank piece of paper. It don't exist. Once Kendrick Bay pledges allegiance to a Moroccan state, then he has state ID. Until then, he's an alien. He don't exist. I don't care what nationality card he got, and I don't care who he got it from. Did he get it from his Moorish state government? No. But once it gets a state ID from its Moorish state government, what should that immediately tell you? That you, Moorish Kendrick Bey, has a constitution. And that your competent Moorish state government issued you your state ID. Without this, there's no this. And you keep flashing at the United States of America like this, man, I got a nationality card. And it's blank. That's the way they're looking at it. It means nothing to them. Why? Because it don't say state. And you can't prove it. You acquiesced. Let's continue. Okay, so the purpose of going over all of that, that way AMPAC can try to impress upon the Moors that the United States of America and the United States has in fact and in truth judicial authority, both civil and criminal jurisdiction over who? Moroccan subjects and Moroccan proteges. We have to understand that. If we don't understand that, then all is lost. So therefore, AMPAC can point out problems, right? But we also must point out solutions. And what is the solution? Your pen. The pen is the solution. But how do you use your pen? First, you have to come back to what? You have to now come back into being competent mentally, understanding that you need what? A constitution. Without the constitution, there's nothing. So Moors have to understand with their pen, you have to enact legislation. And through that legislation, now your Moors have an opportunity, your Moroccan subjects have an opportunity to do what? Return to a Moorish state government, according to the Treaty of Madrid, Article 15. And by that way, and that way only, can you now become a Moorish national. All right? So let's continue. Now, we're going to now start reading chapter 2. Okay, Morris? Now, we won't finish reading chapter 2 today, because we need to really underscore what chapter 1 was all about. It's about authority, right, of a contract, right? We're trying to determine who has authority over who. And the parties must be known. If we don't know who the parties are, then we can't enforce a contract. All right? So we're going ahead and start chapter 2. Obviously, we'll finish this up in class 56, but we'll spend the next 15 minutes or so on chapter 2 as we get started. All right? So chapter 2 of the Act of Algeciras 1906 is about more regulations. It's about Moorish authority. It's about who? The parties must be known. Who we going to read about? The Moors on this side of the contract that's enforcing the empire, right? Moorish nationals of a Moorish government is what chapter 2 is about. Articles 13 through 30. Okay? So what we're going to do, because it's approximately, it's about 21 articles in chapter 2. So we're going to read 6 articles at a time, then go back and reflect. Okay? So let's read the first 6 articles, okay? All right, Mother. Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. Regulations concerning the detection and repression of the contraband of arms.
All right, let's stop right there. Moors is all about titles, right? Moors have to learn how to read. We have to stop skimming words. So what is Article 2 about? Regulations. What is regulations? Legislation. What is legislation? Those are the rules, That's the positive law of your state, the legislation, the matriarchal council, the Lil Aziz establishes legislation. They enact a bill through the legislative branch. And they send that bill over to where? The executive branch. So the executive branch, i.e. the Wazir al-Res, can now sign that bill into law. So the regulations is really legislation or the policies, procedures, protocols of your Moorish state government. So it's the legislation concerning detection and repression of the contraband of arms. And what is contraband? Any illegal substance, right? But they were specific in the treaty. What's the illegal substance? Arms. What are arms? Weapons. Right? So we're going to learn in chapter 2, it's now the Moors are learning they have authority over all arms. I'll say it again. Moorish state governments have authority over all arms. All right? Okay, let's go ahead and get started with Article 13.
Article 13. Throughout the Sharifian Empire, except in the cases specified by Articles 14 and 15, the importation and sale is forbidden of arms of war, parts of guns, ammunition in any nature, loaded or unloaded, powder, saltpeter, gun cotton, nitroglycerin, and all compositions destined exclusively for the manufacture of ammunition. Article 14. Such explosives as are necessary for industry and public works may, however, be introduced, a regulation drawn up in the manner indicated by Article 18 shall determine the conditions under which their importation may be effected. Article 15. The arms, parts of guns, and ammunition intended for the troops of His Sharifian Majesty will be admitted after the fulfillment of the following formalities. A declaration signed by the Moorish Minister of War describing the number and nature of such articles ordered abroad must be presented to the legation of the country of their origin, whose visa shall be affixed thereto. Visa. The passage through the customs of the cases and packages containing the arms and munitions delivered at the order of the Moorish government shall be effected upon the presentation, 1, of the aforesaid declaration, 2, of the invoice indicating the number and weight of the packages and the number and kind of arms and munitions contained therein. This document must be visaed by the legation of the country of their origin, which will mark on the back the successive amounts previously passed through the customs. This visa will be refused when the order shall have been entirely delivered. Article 16. The importation of sporting and high-priced arms, parts of guns, cartridges, loaded and unloaded, is likewise forbidden. It may nonetheless be authorized. 1 degree for the strictly personal requirements of the importer. 2 degree for supplying the gun shops authorized by Article 18. Article 17. Sporting and high-priced arms and the ammunition for the same will be admitted for the strictly personal requirements of the importer on presentations of permit issued by the representative of the Magazin at Tangier. If the importer is a foreigner, this permit will only be granted at the request of his legation. With respect to ammunition for sporting purposes, each permit shall allow a maximum of 1,000 cartridges or the supplies necessary for the manufacture of 1,000 cartridges. The permit shall only be issued to those who have never been sentenced or any offense. Article 18, the trade in sporting and high-priced arms, not rifled or foreign manufacture, as well as the ammunition appertaining to the same, shall be regulated as soon as circumstances permit by a Sharifian decision made in conformity with the advice of a majority of the diplomatic body at Tangier. This shall be the case as well with decisions intended to suspend or restrict the exercise of such trade. Only such persons as have secured a special and temporary license from the Moorish government shall be allowed to open and operate retail shops for the sale of sporting guns and ammunition.
All right, thank you very much. So that's the first 6 articles of chapter 2. Immediately, what are we recognizing immediately? Remember, the parties must be known. First of all, the Moorish state governments have authority and jurisdiction over what? Arms. Only such persons as have secured a special and temporary license from the Moorish government shall be allowed to open and operate retail shops for the sale of sporting guns and ammunition. Now that's just for sport. As we go back up, we go back to Article 13, where it all begins, right? Chapter 2, the Moors have the sovereign authority. Well, what type of Moors? Moors of a Moorish state government. So what has the sovereign authority? The Moorish state, not the individual Moors. The Moorish state has the sovereign authority, and through the Moorish state, it has what? Its authorized competent authority, who has what? An emanating document known as their governmental credentials, shall oversee arms. So, your government authority, your competent authority, is now authorized through the legation, through the legislation, through the regulations of your Moorish state government. And they can deal with what? Concerning detection and repression of the contraband of arms. But this first Article 13 is important for Moors to understand. Article 13 tells you the jurisdiction. What's the jurisdiction? Throughout the Sharifian Empire. Let's read it again. Throughout the Sharifian Empire. So what's the jurisdiction? The empire. So the Moor state governments oversee the empire. And the Moors oversee arms throughout the empire. That's the jurisdiction. Except in the cases specified by Articles 14 and 15, the importation and sale is forbidden of arms of war. So what? The importation, so arms coming into Morocco and arms going out of Morocco, imports and exports. More state governments control arms. Into where? In Morocco. Not the United States of America, not the United States, in Morocco. So how can Moors control arms if they're not in Morocco? If they're not in the Sharifian Empire? If you're still stuck in the United States, you can't enforce any regulation as it relates to arms. This is why they treat Moors the way they treat them about their arms, because you're still a subject. You're still a subject. So the United States is controlling arms. Why? Because Moors have acquiesced and they're not enforcing their own constitution and treaties. Listen. Article 13 from the top. Throughout the Sharif Empire, except in the cases specified by the Articles 14 and 15, the importation and sale is forbidden of arms of war, parts of guns, ammunition of any nature, loaded or unloaded, powder, saltpeter, gun cotton, nitroglycerin, and all compositions destined exclusively for the manufacture of ammunition. So Article 13 is very powerful. Okay, who are the parties? Who is overseeing the treaty? More state governments, more nationals, more specifically, the authorized authority of the state, who have the eminent credentials to now negotiate any treaty disputes. So right here in Article 13, we got to really understand what we're reading here. Article 13, throughout the Sharif Empire jurisdiction, except in the cases specified by Articles 14 and 15, the importation and sale is forbidden of arms of war, parts of guns, ammunition of any nature, loaded or unloaded, powder, saltpeter, gun cotton, nitroglycerin, and all compositions destined exclusively for the manufacture of ammunition. Who oversees this? Moors. Wait a minute. So if we oversee all arms of war, what does that mean? That means the United States, any of their what? Arms of war is what? Forbidden. That's what the treaty says. Let me make myself clear. For those people out there that try to twist my words. The treaty says that the Moors are the authority of arms. What type of Moors? Moor state governments. So the Moor state is in charge of dealing with arms. What type of arms? Well, arms of war. And those arms of war are what? Forbidden. That's what the treaty says. And the treaty is what?
Supreme.
Listen. So the United States of America's Constitution, Article 6, Section 2, says what? From the top, this right here is Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1. The United States is bound to the treaties that have been made or which shall be made, right? So the United States is bound to the treaty. Then the United States is already aware that their arms of war is forbidden. Why am I underscoring this? Because you have people such as the police of the United States, and there are several states, they're carrying around what? Arms of war, right? All this time, Black Lives Matter signs, banners, Black Panthers, you name it, have been trying to get the police and their agencies to treat us at least with humanity, equal justice. We've been begging, we've been pleading, we've been marching, we standing up there with the President of the United States, and they're coming up with civil rights, and the whole time, the Moors had a treaty that controlled all the arms. Why am I underscoring this? We could have fixed this problem ever since 1906. What's nitroglycerin? You know what they use nitroglycerin for?
Gunpowder.
Gunpowder. You know what else is used with nitroglycerin, etc.? Atomic bombs, etc. Explosive devices. So their atomic bombs is what? Forbidden. Because their atomic bomb is what? Arms of war. Why am I underscoring this? We will continue reading this in class 56, but let me show you something real quick as we start to close out. The United Nations has been trying to get the Moors' attention. Listen. This is the rights of indigenous people. It's referred to as the annex. Some people call it the preamble, but it's the annex, right? Before you get to the articles. Look what the United Nations put in the annex. First, let's start up here. Right here, mother. This is page 2 of the Rights of Indigenous People, 2007. Page 2, the annex. Mother, start right here as we start to close out.
Convinced that control by indigenous peoples over developments affecting them and their lands, territories, and resources will enable them to maintain and strengthen their institutions, cultures, and traditions, and to promote their development in accordance with their aspirations and needs. Recognizing that respect for indigenous knowledge, cultures, and traditional practices contributes to sustainable and equitable development and proper management of the environment, emphasizing the contribution of the demilitarization of the lands and territories of indigenous peoples to peace, economic and social.
Stop. Okay. Let's pause 3 seconds. Read that sentence again.
Emphasizing the contribution of the demilitarization of the lands and territories of indigenous peoples to peace, economic and social progress and development, understanding and friendly relations among nations and peoples of the world.
Okay, so what should we take away from that? Look what the United Nations, 193 states around planet Earth, put into the rights of indigenous people. For who? Moors. Why did they put this in there for Moors? Because Moors, in their own treaty of the Act of Algeciras, 1906, Chapter 2, Article 13, says the Moors can control what? Arms. More specifically, arms of war. And when you control the arms of war, because you've been colonized and now under post-millennium per consanguinity, you're coming back into statehood, that means you control the jurisdiction of your land. And when you control the jurisdiction of your land as a Moorish state government, what happens? Emphasizing the contribution of the demilitarization of the lands and territories of Moors to establish what? Peace. Because once you have peace and you have your interior domains, then you can have economics. This is why in the Rights of Indigenous People it says that Moors can demilitarize. How could they just simply say that? Because they're reading your Moorish treaty. Moors, Chapter 2, Article 13 of the Act of Algeciras says you get to do what? Listen. You get to do what? Demilitarize. Because weapons of mass destruction are forbidden where? In Morocco. Who controls it? More state governments. Listen, as we begin to wrap up. Rights of Indigenous People, 2007. Let's go to Article 30. Article 30. This is what the United Nations wrote for Moors. Article 30, mother, please.
Article 30, number 1, military activities shall not take place in the lands or territories of indigenous peoples unless justified by a relevant public interest or otherwise freely agreed with or requested by the indigenous peoples concerned. 2, states shall undertake effective consultations with the indigenous peoples concerned through appropriate procedures and in particular through their representative institutions prior to using their lands or territories for military activities.
So how is it that 193 states around planet Earth could write this in the rights of indigenous people? You know how they could write this to tell the United States they can't have military activities? Oh, okay, because treaties supreme law of the land. They're telling Moors to enforce your treaties in order to bring peace on planet Earth. But guess what? Moors can't bring peace to planet Earth until they bring peace in Morocco. And the only way for them to bring peace in Morocco, well, first they got to enforce their own constitution, 1. Then they have to ratify and accede to the treaties, 2. Once they do that, and they're maintaining the jurisdiction, then and only then can they do what? Say that arms of war are forbidden. Then and only then, once they have a constitution, can they do what?
Stop all military activities. What's a military activity?
The police of the United States is a military activity. Why? Because the police work for who? Private, for-profit, international organizations, corporations of the United States. It's a military complex. To keep who? To keep Moroccan subjects repressed. So we'll finish this up in class 56. But for now, Moors have to now study. We have to get out of fellowship and get into scholarship. And we have to start understanding the power of our own constitutions. Because then and only then will we be able to do what? Control arms in Morocco. I am with that. Islam.
Islam.